All right, ladies and gentlemen, good day, good afternoon. My name is Federico Hernandez from the rumble.com and Zavvy Network. I'm super excited to be here. I'm actually at a different place. I usually stream from my home. I took my daughter for a camping trip. I'm like, I'm not gonna stay camping. I'm sorry, Daddy. I need to have good Wi-Fi so I can do a good. This presentation today can have any mistakes. But today, really quickly, I did a small intro, but let me talk about our tools. To your right, we have all our chat box. Let our guests know where you're seeing or visiting us from, or viewing or hearing us from. If you have any questions during the event, I'm sure a lot of people are going to have questions today. Make sure to write them on the bottom of the screen where it says ask questions. We kindly ask everybody to please share the event on social media. There's a place up right above that says share. If you can invite other people, that would be great. Today's agenda is going to be around 30-40 minutes talking about the main presentation, 1 or 2 minutes sharing about contact information, and then room on clock. Yay! So let's deep dive really quickly. Today's main topic is the truth in alcohol labeling. Our guest is Bailey Pryor. He's the founder and CEO of the Real McCoy Rum, which is based on a film he produced for PBS with the same name. Everybody knows who the Real McCoy is. He's also the writer, producer, and director in the film and television industry for more than 25 years. He has 17 Emmy Awards nomination, has won 7 Emmy Awards. He's also the president and CEO of Telemark Films in Mystic, and that's in Connecticut, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And plus, he was the president before of another company in Colorado. But enough said. Let's bring in Bailey so he can say hello to everyone.
Hi, Fede. Thank you very much, and thanks for joining, everybody. It's great to be here. I think it's a very strange time in this world, but I think we can see that there's a lot of hopefully progress happening at the same time as we all experience this together, and various other social issues that are very overdue to be dealt with in this country, which I'm hoping will be progressing well. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was truth in alcohol labeling, and I think that that's a very important social issue because it affects basically every consumer. And we know that, in the food industry, every food you buy, whether that's like, takeout food at some, fast food place, or prepared foods at the grocery store, a box of cereal, a jug of milk, everything you buy that's in the food industry has to have mandatorily ingredients and serving facts on the packaging. So it tells you and fully discloses what's in there. And there's teeth in that legislation and those regulations, so that anybody who misreports can get fined and shut down, and all these sorts of things that the Food and Drug Administration enforce. And so when you buy tofu, cereal, chicken, potato chips, whatever you want, you're going to see exactly what the ingredients are right there on the packaging. And you're going to see what the serving facts are, how much added sugar there is, how many carbs, how much fat, how much trans fats, all that stuff. So it's great information. And this is relatively new. Obviously, this legislation came in around the late 70s and early 80s. It took about a decade to make it mandatory in the United States. And that information has become, ubiquitous. It's on every piece of food, processed food that you can buy.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that and you recognize how pervasive that is and how important that information is for people with allergies and various ailments that they can't have, peanuts, or they're diabetic and they can't have extra sugar and things like that, this gives them the information that they need. So we have to ask ourselves the question, why is that not the case with alcohol? Because there's no beverage alcohol in the United States that lists these items. So there's no beer, no wine, no spirits that we've been able to find, and we've searched extensively, and we've even had a research firm search this extensively, and we haven't been able to find anybody else who's doing this, who's listing ingredients and serving facts. Some people have voluntarily done portions of those. They might list something on their shipper box, or they might put something on their website, but it's not necessarily all of the information. It's not standardized. There's very few people who've even done that. And there's certainly no regulatory body that's forcing everyone mandatorily to do this, and instituting a clear set of information like the Food and Drug Administration has done. So it leads you to recognize that there certainly are additives in beers and wines and spirits. There are ingredients in beers and wines and spirits, all the beverage alcohols. So why not list these things? Why not indicate where the fat is, the carbs, the sugar? Why not show what the allergens are and things like that? So that was one of the things that has always sort of stuck in the back of my mind. And when I founded the Real McCoy Rum, one of the key things I was doing with this brand was to actually have the brand live up to the name. And when I first came up with the idea to start the rum company, I went around and looked for, information on starting my own distillery, creating, working with suppliers. And I had a couple of suppliers who produce products that I initially met very, very early on. We're talking like 2009, 2008, who happily and sort of regularly just said to me straight out. So, they said, well, tell us what you want it to taste like, and we'll introduce you to our guys with the lab coats, and we'll start with a neutral spirit, and we'll put a bunch of stuff in it to get it to the flavor profile that you want. And I was just like, I'm like, what? Wait a minute. I didn't know there were guys with lab coats. I thought vodka was, clean and pure. And I thought that, rum didn't have additives unless it was, spiced and things like that. And I had no idea how wrong I was at the time, but it always interested me. And I started to do a lot of research into production techniques. And I've done apprenticeships at different distilleries, and I've worked with Richard Seal for years and years now. And he's been an amazing source of information, very, very talented and gentleman, and a great friend, and who's given me a lot of information and inspiration over the years. And, I really enjoyed Richard right from the very beginning, because when I first went to him and said to him, I want to start this rum company, and he said, well, and I said, I just want to make the kind of rum that Bill McCoy would have had on the deck of his ship back in 1920. And Bill was famous as the Real McCoy for never adulterating his spirits. So, during Prohibition, people were finding spirits and they were cutting it with whatever they could to make, to stretch it and make more money. So they would cut it with turpentine and wood alcohol and poisonous items. They would do, prune juice and things like that, water. And so those nicknames those products became nicknamed once they'd been stepped on, basically, once they'd been adulterated. And they were called booze and hooch. Fetty, you're familiar with all of this. Booze and hooch and rot gut and all these things. And I'm just thinking, wow, those are all additives to this. And I said, I want whatever Bill McCoy would have had that was unadulterated. And that's when Richard Seal said to me, well, that's great, because that's all we make at Foursquare. We don't make adulterated products. We only do unadulterated. And I wanted like a very, very traditional Barbados rum, because we knew that McCoy, from some photographs that we found, that McCoy was getting rum from Barbados. And so Richard said, well, we can make a very traditional product. And I think I'm correct in saying this, that the Real McCoy is the most traditional of all the types of rums that Richard makes. That our rum is very, very traditional, the 3-year, the 5-year, the 12-year McCoys, because we're not, with those core products, we're not doing different types of wood barrels and things like that, more modern blending techniques. It's very traditional, and that's exactly what we want it to be, like old school. There, we're losing it a little bit. You good? Got me?
There we go. All right.
Looks like we lost signal for a second there. So that was really important to me, and I wanted to make sure that we stuck with that concept, and that we didn't call ourselves the Real McCoy, but we actually were the Real McCoy. Yeah. And so every decision we've made in the process has been that. And so we have an unadulterated rum from a master distiller who is, arguably one of the greatest of all time in rum production. We have, we use recycled labels. We do everything we can to do things authentically and sustainably and transparently. And so it just made no sense to us. And it was really my wife, Jennifer, who pushed this concept of, we really need to be putting ingredients and serving facts on our labels, because this is the cornerstone of what the Real McCoy is all about. It's what Bill McCoy was all about. Why don't we do this? And nobody else is doing it. So she really pushed for that, and we went for it. And it took a great deal of time to get this done. So now, starting this month, we're releasing our 2020 limited edition, which is actually 100 proof, and it's 100 proof in honor of the 100th anniversary of the commencement of rum running, the beginning of Prohibition. And on those labels, on the back label, we've listed ingredients and serving facts. And that's a huge milestone in the beverage alcohol business, because when we first tried to put this on our labels, we were told we couldn't do it, that the US government told us we're not allowed to voluntarily put ingredients and serving facts on our labels. And we had to jump through lots of loopholes. And it wasn't because there's some, conspiracy or anything like that. It was just there isn't legislation that exists right now that clearly defines exactly how this is supposed to be done, the way the FDA does. So the folks at the U.S. Tax and Trade Bureau, known as the TTB, who regulate bottle labels, those are really key in getting that information out there. And so I know, Fede, you had some questions about that kind of stuff. So maybe if you want to get into that a little bit, because the TTB is a really interesting organization.
Well, that's actually my first question is like, what is the TTB, right? What is their role right now when it comes to alcohol?
Well, the TTB actually has a long history in the United States. They used to be called the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And after the incident at Waco, Texas, they rebranded themselves, and now they're called the TTB. So the Tax and Trade Bureau is responsible for, part of their job is responsible for the registration and monitoring and enforcement of regulations related to bottle labels. And so there's very specific language in the American regulatory process for beverage alcohol, and so the TTB makes sure that everything is enforced. And so they measure the size of the fonts that you use to the milliliter. To the millimeter of the size of the fonts, the types of the fonts, the background, so things can't be hidden on labels. So there's very, very specific information that go onto labels. Those labels have to be reviewed and approved by the TTB before you're allowed to use them on any beverage alcohol. So they do this with all beer, wine, and spirits. And so since there is no regulation yet in the United States that focuses on ingredients and serving facts and the enforcement of that, or the proper type of disclosures, they just basically said, well, that's not part of the regulatory process for us right now, so we don't want you to do it.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And so we argued that with them quite extensively and said, well, listen, we're trying to voluntarily disclose really important information so that there is more transparency to consumers, so that consumers will have more confidence in what they're drinking. And part of it also is that I'm very allergic to sulfites. So I used to like to drink wines, but they put a lot of sulfites in some wines. And now I just find that I can't drink any wine because there's no disclosure on the label that tells me this one has a lot of sulfites in it and that one has a little, or none. And so I was like the canary in the coal mine with sulfites. When with me and my friends, we'd go out to dinner somewhere and somebody would buy a bottle of wine and they would give me one sip. And if I took even one sip, I would immediately turn all flush. My skin would turn red. My ears would turn red. I had these terrible reactions to the sulfites. So we'd know immediately that there's a lot of sulfites in that wine. And if I didn't, it was like a parlor game. Is Bailey going to turn red when he sips this? And if I sipped it and it didn't turn, I didn't have an allergic reaction to it, then there wasn't a lot of sulfites in the wine. And so
everybody's like, yeah, let's drink.
Yeah, and everyone's like, yeah, that's great. Let's have some wine. It's okay. So I was like the king's food taster. He didn't die. We can eat it.
Bailey made it alive. All right.
So, so for me, these are important things, and I would like to know. And I think it's important that people do know, and especially when you have additives that are pervasive in the industry, in some cases, and those additives aren't being disclosed readily. And I think people want to know what's in there. They want to know what's in their food. They want to know what's in their drinks. And so I think this is a major step forward. So it took us 9 months of back and forth with the TTB. And finally they said, okay, you can do this, you can't do that. And they said, great, we'll let you put this information on here. And so we got on the back label, we were allowed to put list ingredients and serving facts. Fetty, can you show that picture I sent you?
Yeah, and actually you're creating, if they approve it, you're creating something that's going to be probably the standard moving forward for many rum companies, which or all spirits companies.
All beverage alcohol. So that's what we're hoping, that other people can point and say, well, look, those guys, because I'm sure there's tons of people out there, tons of producers that want to disclose this exact same information. So now there's a little bit of groundwork that's been done that allows other people to do this, and they can point at Real McCoy and say, well, you let them do it, why can't you let us do it? And all we did was we followed the exact structure of the Food and Drug Administration. So we did exactly what the FDA requires, from the size of the font and putting it in a box and making certain words bold and other words not bold, and all that is modeled on that. Now, if you look at this picture on the right, that's the back label. That's a close-up of the back label of our new limited edition that comes out this month. And you see right in the middle, it says ingredients, and it says rum and Barbados spring water. And that's the ingredients, because there's nothing else in there. And we had to send this to third-party testing agencies to prove this to the federal government. So we sent this to a group called BDAS, Brewing and Distilling Analytics Services in Lexington, Kentucky, and they tested it. They tested it for us, and independent. They have no interest in us, and so they're a totally independent company. And so they do the test, and they come back and say, well, here's what we found in our tests. And so we also when we did the test, we looked to see if we're gluten free, and we are. There was zero trace of gluten in there, and we're also vegan because Richard Seal doesn't use any meat products in the process of making his spirits. And one thing you think, well, why would anyone use meat products in making rum? Well, actually, because charcoal filters that people use in the production process can often, to take out particulate matter and things like that, are often made with bone material. So there's things you would never even imagine might have an animal connection to it. I mean, there's meat products and soy sauce. Like, how does this happen? So so it's all due to filtration and things like that. So you have to go through this process. So every step of the process, we looked at how Richard does it. We showed that to the gluten and the vegan people, and we got certifications both for gluten and for from the vegan group. I forget their name right off the top of my head. I'm sorry. And so that allows us to actually put those on the label. In addition to that, we have the serving facts. And so this is directly from BDAS. They looked at this, they tested everything, and they said, okay, for this serving size, here's the servings per container, the amount per serving. You've got alcohol by volume, you've got calories, you've got carbs, fat, and protein. But there's one really important thing that's missing. And if anybody can guess what that is, I'll send you a Real McCoy bandana.
Man, I messed up. I started trying to close up.
Yeah, and so what's missing was that we were mandated by the TTB. You cannot put this on here, and I still don't know why, but they said you cannot list how much sugar has been added. Right.
Oh.
So we wanted to disclose that we have zero sugar added, and I can show anybody who wants to see it, the independent third-party testing agency, BDAS, or you can call them directly and ask them what was our sugar content. You'll see it was zero.
Yeah.
And so,
actually, Keegan guessed it out before you said it.
Oh, Keegan did? Okay, Keegan, yeah. I owe you. This is Keegan in London, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I owe Keegan a bandana. So. So the interesting thing about that is, for whatever reason, and I don't think it was, people come to me, oh, the government must be in cahoots with big alcohol that doesn't want to talk about these things. I really don't think it's that at all. I just think that they, they're sensitive to, very volatile discussions, and sugar is a very volatile product in packaged goods. And so I think they just didn't want to deal with the fallout of that, or to set a precedent, more importantly. So they didn't include sugar, but we're going to continue to lobby for this in our own way, in our own small way. But I think this is a very, very good start. I mean, this is like 95% of what we wanted to accomplish. We got on here, which I'm amazed we got that far. And I think it's great because now you have verifiable documentation. Anybody who wants to see it can contact us. We can show it to you, or we can even have you contact the independent agencies.